Chapter 5. The South Island. The hot sea had never looked more calm. The keepers of the outer wall's west gate set about closing the massive gate. All went well. The island would be safe for the night. Another job well done. All the water they needed was collected that day. When the water was finished cooling, it was released to be used by everyone on the island. Mai headed home and went directly to bed. He was a young, unmarried gatekeeper working in the service of his island. Gatekeepers were highly respected for their dependability and the importance of their job. The gatekeepers knew that lives depended on them to be faithful and reliable. It was a responsibility that none of them took lightly. But that night Mai went to bed early, not feeling well. He slept fitfully with a burning fever. He dreamt and felt a hunger deep inside. He awoke in the middle of the night. His mind was blurred and fogged like the hot sea in the morning. He craved and desired that which he did not have. He rose from his bed and began to walk. He knew where to go. Laggy arrived home. "Hi, Mum." Laggy smiled as he hugged his mother. "How is my sis doing? I have brought you your favourite." He hugged his sister and gave her something. She opened it and exclaimed excitedly, "Coconut cakes! And it isn't even my birthday." She began eating with a smile on her face. Thank you, Laggy." Sis, still not walking, but her injuries from the burns were getting better every day. Everyone hoped she would be on her feet soon. It would boost her spirits so much if she could just take that first step. "Where have you been today?" asked Lai. "We met at the market today to discuss progress and other things of interest." "Tell me, please," insisted his sister. "We have 3 boats completed and a 4th almost finished. North Islanders will travel home tomorrow." "What about the strange rumours on the south side?" asked his mother. "There were reports that some people have gone missing. No one seems to be able to find them. The south side communities will be searching today and tomorrow. We have another meeting tomorrow to make plans to bring more help to the search effort," finished Laggy. The next day, Laggy prepared to head off to the meeting. He gave his sister a hug on the way out, and she thanked him again for the coconut cakes. His mother hugged and kissed him goodbye. She was headed to the market, leaving Lai alone for part of the day. Laggy met with Ku, Rua, and island elders from all parts of the island. After some discussion amongst the island's senior elders, H stood up to speak. "We have heard from Elder Manaya of the south side today. He has told us that there are scores of people missing now. He also said that crops have been pulled up by their roots and that trees have been cut down and dragged away. Houses and sheds made of wood have disappeared, and those of stone with thatched roofs have lost their roofs, leaving only the stone walls behind. Livestock have gone missing too. The South Islanders have followed the scuff marks on the ground, and they lead to the Travertine Hills. Today the south side has a party of volunteers that will go out in search of the missing people. The east, west, and north side are all sending volunteers here tomorrow. The new volunteers will join the south side in the Travertine Hills." By late afternoon that day, Laggy arrived back at the farm. A terrible wave of fear swept over him as he looked at what was left of the farm. Every tree was gone, cut down by axe blows. Smaller trees and shrubs had been pulled up by their roots. The grasses had been cut to the ground. The thatched roof had been torn from their house. The wooden fences and animals were missing. "Lai! Mum!" he shouted as he ran. "Lai! Mum, where are you?" Laggy ran into the house, and there was the brown goat Palu standing over his mother. "Mum, are you okay?" he asked as he helped her to her feet. "I'm okay, but," she sobbed. Is Lai okay? I can't find her anywhere, she said, stumbling over her words. How can this be? Laggy choked out. What has done this? They stood together under the open sky inside their home and hugged for the longest time, crying. Both his sister and the roof of his home were gone. What did you see? Asked Laggy. It was like this when I got back from the market. Mum, I have to go out looking for her. I don't think it is safe here. Let's go to Ranji's place and see if we can get some help. Ranji was their neighbour to the north. Laggy and his mother knocked on the door. Come in, said Tuila as she opened the door. There stood Laggy, his mother, and Palu, the lone remaining goat. Panina and Laggy, nice to see you. What's wrong? She asked when she saw Panina's face. Panina burst into tears and told their story. Tuila hugged Panina for the longest time before anyone spoke. I am going to search for Lai, said Laggy, with determination in his voice. I will go with you, said Ranji. I have a stone axe and a wooden hay fork you can borrow. When are you coming back? Asked Panina. We will be back here tonight, answered Laggy. They returned to Laggy's farm to start the search from there. At the farm, they found drag marks on the ground that led to the south. Laggy became extremely angry at the sight of these marks on the ground. The idea that someone might have dragged his injured sister away like this was more than he could bear. Finally, Laggy gathered himself up and they pressed on, following the drag marks to where they might lead. They travelled until the light was beginning to fade. Along the path, they found nothing but desolation. It looked much like Laggy's farm, where trees, crops, and homes were all gone. There were no survivors found anywhere, not even a stray goat. When it was dark, they stopped. They needed to decide what to do next. Laggy caught Ranji up on the meeting with the elders held earlier in the day, so he could know what was going on. The light is done. It isn't safe. You have to go back, stated Laggy flatly. You could join the volunteers tomorrow if you like. I will continue to follow this trail to its ultimate destination. Tell my mum I will come back for her, and please find a way to keep her safe until I return. Ranji agreed to this as it seemed the best course of action to him. The two hugged and parted ways. Laggy travelled through the night and eventually reached the Travertine Hills. The morning sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon. He followed the path to the south, but eventually it turned sharply to the west. As he crossed the next peak, he saw across the valley some figures scattered about in a circle. His heart began to pound. He took in a deep breath and watched. He was too far away to make out any of the people. A careful approach was necessary to get a better look. Following the naturally dry stream beds, he crept in closer, staying low as he went. He managed to make his way to a vantage point where he could have a better look. They seemed to not have noticed him approaching. He thought he recognized some of the people as South Side folk. He could not see his sister anywhere in the group. He decided to make himself known and approach them out in the open. As they saw him coming towards them, they grabbed their weapons of stone axes, sticks, rocks, and hay forks. They moved to block Laggy. Laggy saw Elder Manaya at the head of the group. "Manaya," said Laggy excitedly as he ran up to greet him and gave him a hug. "It is good to see you. I am in desperate need of help. My farm was destroyed and my sister Lai has gone missing." "We think we may have located where the missing people are. She may be there as well," replied Manaya. "Where? Tell me now and I will go there," exclaimed Laggy. "There are some caves to the west of here, and she may be there. But you best not go until you hear us out. This is a very dangerous situation that we are facing, unlike anything we have experienced before," replied Manaya. "Laggy, you look parched. Sit here and have some fresh water," Manaya said. Laggy sat on a rock next to Manaya. A smouldering fire was still burning. Laggy took the cup offered and began to sip the clean, cool water. Manaya sipped some water, then began speaking. Our volunteers from the south side followed skid marks on the ground. We think the marks were made from trees that had been dragged. The tracks led us to a cave in the Travertine Hills, just to the west of here. When we entered the cave, we were set upon by creatures that attacked us without provocation. They refused our calls to parley. A number of our people were severely injured or killed. We had to retreat. We managed to get some of our injured out. They have been taken back home to be cared for. We are waiting here for the arrival of some volunteers that are coming from other parts of the island. The Southsiders gave Laggy some food, and Laggy shared his respective stories leading up to this meeting. Later that day, the volunteers from the east, west, and north arrived. The new arrivals included only 60 men and 10 women. Ku and Rua were amongst them. Laggy ran over to them, and they hugged and greeted each other. They spent time catching up on what had happened since the meeting yesterday. Ku and Rua were shocked to hear that Laggy's sister was missing. "Don't worry, Laggy. We will find her, I promise you," said Ku as he hugged Laggy again. Laggy was very disappointed to see so few had volunteered. Surely they cannot know what a serious situation this is, or more would have come, he thought. Elder Manaya and Senior Elder H met to discuss the situation. Afterward, H stepped forward to speak to everyone. "This situation is more serious than any of us knew. Yesterday, the South Islanders followed the tracks to a cave in the Travertine Hills. When they entered the cave, they were attacked by creatures of some kind. The Southside folk sustained serious injuries, and some were killed before they retreated from the cave. We don't know what we are facing here, or why this is happening. We suspect that this is related to the people who have gone missing, but we don't know why it would be so. We are going to travel to the cave in hopes of answering these questions. Those of you that do not have weapons should find sticks and sharpen them, or find useful rocks to use in case there is more trouble. We hope to start a conversation with these cave dwellers and perhaps come to some understanding. We don't know where they came from or how they got here. Perhaps they traveled across the hot sea on boats like our ancestors did. However, it is getting late in the day. We must get moving before we run out of light. Everyone, gather up. We will be leaving soon." They marched down the trail in single file through the Travertine Hills. The sun was out, and it was a beautiful day, which they might have enjoyed had it not been for these troubling events. The drag marks on the ground clearly marked the path that had been used. They were easy to follow. Laggy was worried beyond belief by his recent news. He worried about his mother, whom he had left with Tuwila and Ranji. Eventually, the column of poorly armed people stopped their march. Ahead lay an open canyon of stone. Across the canyon, the islanders could see the dark opening of a cave entrance. "Myself, Manaya, Laggy, Ku, Rua, and 3 of the most strapping men of the south side will go in first. Keep the torches lit just behind us. If anyone gets hurt, those behind will evacuate them to safety," commanded H. The group pressed forward into the cave. They stopped just past the entrance to allow their eyes to adjust to the dark. The smell was terrible. It smelt like rotting vegetation and animals. When their eyes adjusted, they could see some trees and tall grasses piled up to one side. "Look there," said Ku. "There are some bodies. We need to recover them." As he spoke, some of the others saw, on the edge of their perception, some movement in the back of the cave, just beyond the light. They could hear footsteps treading away into the darkness. H stepped forward. "I am H. Who goes there?" In the moments that followed, there was nothing but silence. Ku grabbed one of the bodies and waved to a couple of the others, who joined in to carry it out of the cave. "Do you hear that?" said Rua. Everyone was silent. No one moved. Laggy could barely hear something from the back of the cave. It grew louder, until it was clear that it was the sound of footfalls coming closer and closer. Just then, figures of dark grey and green burst from the back of the cave into the light, 2 abreast, each with a stone axe. There were 2 more behind the first 2 and 2 more behind those, and even more behind them in the darkness. "Brace!" yelled H as the creatures crashed down upon them. At the front, forming the point of the spear of their attack, was H and 2 of the big young Southside Islanders. H with a wooden walking stick and the 2 Southsiders with stone axes. Directly behind them were Manea, Laggy, Rua, and one of the young Southsiders, with even more Islanders behind them. Their numbers were so great they filled the entrance of the cave, and were also lined up outside of the cave, waiting to get in. The 2 strapping Southsiders stepped up to meet the challenge, their large, well-muscled arms tensed up. They were thought to be the best the Islanders had to offer. Both Southsiders raised their axes and swung them with all their might. One axe missed its target completely, the other hit the side of the creature, but the axe head had rotated mid-swing and hit on the flat of the head, which bounced off its target, causing no damage. With his full might, H swung his walking stick as one would swing an axe straight over the top, bringing it down from above. It struck one of the creatures in the head, yet the creature still stood unfazed by the blow. "What manner of creature is this that can withstand such a blow?" thought H. Isolated from the modern world by the scalding waters of the hot sea, the islands were a peaceful place. Its inhabitants were unfamiliar with combat, as there were no internal conflicts or outside foes who threatened them. This was the first fight they had ever been involved in. Their lack of experience showed, but they did not lack for courage. The creatures raised their axes and forcefully brought them down. The first axe missed its target by falling short as the Southsider stepped back to avoid being hit. The second creature swung its axe, hitting the other Southsider on the arm. The wounded Southsider moaned and dropped his axe as he fell back into the arms of those behind him. One of the Islanders dragged him back and out of the cave through the throng of people waiting in the rear. Manea quickly stepped up to fill the gap in the line. He wielded a stone axe. The young Southsider swung his weapon without great skill and missed the target, as did Manea. But H's stick found its mark, bouncing off the creature from what seemed to be a harmless blow. Both creatures targeted the young Southsider. The first missed high, but the second struck broadside, and the Islander fell to the ground, dropping his weapon and clutching his side in pain. The Southsider behind him grabbed the wounded man and started dragging him out of the cave. Laggy jumped into the void left by the big Southsider and drove his hayfork forward. "Lie!" he screamed. There was no answer. Laggy's hayfork stabbed into the face of the creature. The wooden tine snapped off as the creature fell backwards into the crowd of its own kind standing behind it. Manea and H swung their weapons. Manea missed, but H, his aim true, struck a creature again without effect. Now weaponless, Laggy reached down and picked up an axe left behind by a fallen Southsider. The other creature, standing face to face with Manea, swung its axe and missed. A creature from the back, seeing the opening, jumped forward, replacing the one that had just fallen. Laggy, enraged by the thought of his sister being held in this place, swung the axe with all his might. He struck another creature in the head, splitting it open, and it fell back and hit the ground with a thud. H and Manea swung their weapons but missed. The standing creature swung its axe and struck Laggy on the thigh, cutting open a terrible wound. Laggy staggered for a moment and grimaced from the pain, but didn't make a sound. With determination in his eyes, he firmly stood his ground. A replacement creature, just one of the many that stood before them, stepped into the gap left by the one last slain by Laggy. All three islanders swung their weapons and missed their targets. Laggy's attempt to attack fell short. He was severely hampered by the gaping wound on his thigh, which was losing blood. The creatures pressed their attack, the first narrowly missing Laggy, the second hitting H, sending him crashing backwards into the arms of the men behind him. A young Southsider replaced H, and the islanders raised and swung their weapons. Swinging his axe with all his remaining strength, Laggy yelled, "Lie!" He missed again. The other two islanders hit their marks with glancing blows that might have brought a man down, yet the creatures still stood. Where did they get their strength to withstand so much punishment? Thought Manaya. He was beginning to tire from the fight. Laggy was losing blood, and his vision began to blur and darken. He fell backwards into the arms of Rua. Laggy barely managed to whisper, "Lie," as he fell into unconsciousness. Earlier that day, the West gatekeepers had opened their gate right on schedule. They were enjoying the weather on this beautiful day. The view from the wall was stunning, as the bright sun shone on the deep, dark blue waters of the hot sea. The travertine walls on the west side dropped straight off like they did on all sides of the island, but the sea was deepest on this side. The west side faced the wide open sea where the biggest storms came from. The best gatekeepers worked here, because the threats from storms were more severe and more dangerous. But today the winds were calm, and the surface was still and smooth as glass. Sitting on the travertine wall, Sion was relaxing in the sun. Pule and Afu sat beside him. They stared at the hot sea, which was barren of life, yet beautiful to behold. They dangled their feet over the side of the wall. They were at a safe height above the water, so there was no fear of getting burned. They held in their hands wooden mugs that had been filled with clean, fresh water of the hot sea and allowed to cool. "I wish I could have gone with the volunteers to help the Southsiders," said Pule, as he sipped his water. "Me too," said Afu. "No one knows anything?" asked Sion. "I heard people were missing," said Afu, waving his hand in the direction of the south side of the island. "To where? Were they swept off the wall by a large wave?" asked Pule, absent-mindedly. "I heard the Southsiders were looking in the Travertine Hills for them," answered Afu. "Maybe they were lost inside one of the caves. That happened once to my friend, Annalani's cousin. He was lost in a cave for 12 days before they found him. He found water in there to drink, or he would have died of thirst." "Yeah," thought Sion. "That was probably it. They were lost somewhere in the caves. They will find them and bring them back." While the gatekeepers were relaxing, they smelt something rank. "Afu," complained Sion. "It wasn't me," Afu defended. Hearing something behind them, the three gatekeepers jumped to their feet. They could not believe the sight before them. Bedraggled creatures of a greyish-green hue held stone axes in their hands and looked directly at them with strange gold eyes. Sion, Pule, and Afu were startled to see even more creatures lingering below, around the cooling pools. "Hi, I am Gatekeeper Afu. Who are you?" asked Afu. There was no answer. The creatures picked up speed and started running towards the gatekeepers. "What the— Stop!" yelled Afu. The other gatekeepers' mouths were agape. Instinctual fear took control of Pule, and his hands trembled. These untrained island boys, who had never been in a fight in their lives, were now facing an existential threat that bore down on them with great menace. But Sion, who had fled the gate in fear and cowardice when the great wave struck the west side not so long ago, was not going to run away this time. He clenched his teeth and tipped his head down like a goat who was about to charge. With glaring yellow eyes, the creatures threateningly raised their axes as they charged. It was too much for Poulet. He quickly turned and fled. He ran down the wall away from the conflict. When the creatures reached the gatekeepers, both Afu and Sion swung their right fists with all their might. Sion's fist hit the bridge of the nose of a creature, and there was a dry, cracking sound. Grimacing, he could feel his fist break through the bones and drive into the creature's skull. Afu swung with a right haymaker and hit a charging creature in the temple of its head with a tremendous blow. Both creatures went down and lay still. Poulet looked back and saw the two creatures drop to the ground. He paused for a moment to watch. Poulet was torn by fear, but captivated and hopeful by what he had just witnessed. Charging directly behind the fallen creatures were two more that had just crested the stairs. Sion braced and grimaced. Sion took another swing with all his might, and this time hit the creature on its neck, but the blow bounced off. The creature showed no sign of pain or injury. Afu swung again, but missed cleanly and lost his balance, stumbling. The creature swung its axe, striking Afu's left arm and causing a terrible wound. Afu barely caught himself before almost going over the edge of the wall into a certain death in the hot sea. The creature pressed its attack on Afu. Panicking, Afu stumbled back. With no place to go, he grabbed the creature, and together they both went over the wall. There was a splash and terrible screams of pain from Afu. The creature made no sound. The other gatekeepers knew what agony it was to be burnt. They had all experienced it to a lesser degree at some time in their lives. The second creature swung its axe at Sion, striking him on his right arm with the flat of the head. Sion fell towards the edge of the wall, but he was on the island side of it rather than the seaside. At the base of the wall was a stone surface, about 3 to 4 men's height below the top. Unable to catch his balance, he fell over the edge, crashing to the hard surface below, where he lay still. Seeing this, Poulet continued his retreat away from the danger. He didn't stop until the creatures were just smallish figures behind him on the horizon. He stood there and watched for a moment. He felt a terrible sense of shame that he had fled and left behind his friends when they needed his help. He could see that the creatures were felling trees and cutting down anything green that grew from the moisture found around the cooling pools. And then, to his absolute horror, he saw what could not be. "They can't do this," he thought. "Stop!" shouted Poulet as he ran back towards the gate. "Stop! Stop doing that! You fools! You'll kill us all!" As Poulet ran, the creatures had encircled the base of the wooden block and tackle, which held up the huge gate stone when it was raised. They rocked the wooden supports that held it up, causing the gate stone to rock back and forth too. Poulet continued to run towards them and shout, but the creatures kept on about their mindless task, until finally the supports gave way, and the gate stone came crashing down. The stone hit the edge of the wall and teetered for a split second before it went over and fell into the hot sea, disappearing into the deep blue depths. Poulet fell to the ground. "How could they do this? How could they be so foolish? The whole island will flood!" Sobbing into his hands, he cried. Laggy was just starting to awaken. "Lie, where?" he said with his leg throbbing in pain. "Shh," said Ku, who was leaning over Laggy. "Rest easy, my friend." Rua reached over and put a fresh, moist cloth on Laggy's forehead. "You were injured in the battle," said Ku. "Rua pulled you out to safety when you fell unconscious. He saved your life, Laggy." "Thank you," Laggy said with a weak smile. "Did you find Lay?" "No. We were badly beaten in the fight. We lost many good young men." Laggy moaned in pain from the news and tried to sit up, but they pushed him back down as Ku shook his head. No. Ku continued. Elder Manaya was lost in the battle, but not before he felled 2 of the creatures as you did. Those were the only creatures we brought down before we were beaten. Almost nothing seemed to affect them. They just kept coming. I survived probably because I helped pull a body out of the battle before it began, or I might not have made it. And you were lucky to be alive, as is Rua. H? Asked Laggy weakly. H was wounded but pulled to safety too, said Ku. The tired and beaten South Islanders set up camp for the night in the Travertine Hills. Tomorrow morning they would reassess the situation and come up with a better strategy for dealing with the creatures that had invaded their once peaceful home. But the morning didn't come before a traveller reached the camp, interrupting their sleep in the middle of the night. Loud and excited voices roused everyone. Sleepily, people began to gather in the centre of the camp, where a wounded H stood leaning against the walking stick he had fought so bravely with not so many hours ago. H stepped forward and spoke. Everyone, listen up. I have just been informed that the creatures reached the west gate during our battle in the cave. They tore down the block and tackle and caused the gate stone on the open gate to drop into the hot sea. The crowd gasped and moaned. Tension began to build. Sis and Mum, thought Laggy in turmoil and agony. Why would they do something so foolish? Yelled one from the crowd. Don't they know we will be flooded by the hot sea? Said another. And everything on the island will be killed in the process. No one can survive the hot sea. Not even those creatures, said another. Can we repair the gate? Asked yet another. As you know, the gate stones are only open part way to control the flow, but with the stone gone, the water is already rushing in at an uncontrollable rate. The inner wall region is already filling up fast. We don't have much time. We don't have a spare gate stone to make the repair with, nor a way to get such a massive stone there in time if we did. This situation with the creatures complicates things further. We are going to have to evacuate to the North Island. 3 new boats are built and ready. We can get the 4th boat ready quickly as it is almost finished. The one place high enough to stay safe is the outer wall if you can get to it safely. If you can't get to the outer wall, then travel from the centre of the island and gather at the inner gate, and we will find a way across once we get there. Everyone must leave now. Find your loved ones and spread the word. Anyone left behind could be killed by the flooding or the creatures. Laggy, Ku, Rua and H were going to join the group heading through the centre of the island. Ku and Rua were helping the wounded. Some supply carts had been emptied, and the wounded had been loaded onto them. One of the women tending to the wounded approached H, saying, One of the wounded Southsiders, named Hawea, is very ill. He is hot to the touch and has been coughing. He began thrashing around, so we had to tie him down. Can you come have a look at him? H hobbled over to where Hawea was lying. Hawea's appearance was strange. His skin had become rougher in appearance and had a slight greyish hue to it. Hawea was rolling about and moaning, oblivious to those around him. This is strange, mumbled H. Hawea, can you hear me? There was no response. Hawea, this is H. Can you hear me? Still, Hawea didn't respond. Try to keep him comfortable. We must keep moving. Let me know if his condition changes. The caretaker grabbed H's arm and stopped him. There's more, she said. Last night, there were 4 others who came down sick with a cough and were burning up with fever. We put them in a wagon together, but now they are gone, and we can't find them. H had the men look around for those who had gone missing, but they found no sign of them. Out of time, they finally began their journey. The trip was going to be exceedingly difficult, but everyone knew what would happen if they didn't beat the hot sea. Their pace was brutal, and no one said a word. Worry lined everyone's face. The fear of the unknown was weighing on them. There was so much concern. More and more people they met along the way joined the caravan. They sent runners out ahead to warn everyone. When they reached Lagit's farm, they sent Rua to run to Ranji's farm to bring his mother back. Rua was alone when he returned. "Rua, where is Mum?" asked Lagi. "No one was home," replied Rua. Ku spoke up. "Surely they got the news and have gone to the north side. By the gods of the hot sea, I hope they are okay." The creatures at the west gate were on the move after they overcame the gatekeepers and destroyed the west gate. They marched through the hot waters, being released through the gate opening, oblivious to the pain of their flesh being burnt away from their legs. Ranji arrived home the same morning the islanders were preparing to enter the cave. Tuwila was so happy to see him. She cried and hugged him. These were strange and upsetting times. Ranji had to tell Lagi's mother that Lagi had continued to search for Lai. She knew as much already. She knew Lagi too well and felt it in her heart. He would not give up the search for his sister easily. He would do anything for his family. Tuwila fixed a meal for Ranji, who hadn't eaten or slept all night. She encouraged him to get some rest and promised to wake him up when Lagi returned. So Ranji went to bed. A while later, Ranji was awakened by his wife shouting his name. "Ranji! Ranji, wake up!" Ranji rolled over and jumped out of bed. He ran to the front of the house, where he saw Panina and Tuwila looking out of the window. "Look over there," whispered Tuwila, pointing. Ranji saw, coming from the west, about 20 people. Or were they? He thought. Their appearance was strange. He couldn't believe what he saw. They were heading directly towards his home. "What are they?" asked Panina. They could see odd-coloured creatures marching towards them. The lower half of their legs below the knees looked almost like skeletons, where the flesh had been partially burnt away. "Do the dead walk?" whispered Tuwila. Ranji grabbed his axe and went towards the front door. "No," whispered Tuwila urgently as she grabbed him by the arm. "There are too many of them. We must get away from here. Come, at the back door." She opened the back door, and there stood the brown goat, Palu. They stayed low and walked quietly away from the house. The little brown goat followed close behind. They didn't see anyone following them. By late in the day, they reached the east side community where they stopped to get food and shelter for the night. The next morning they woke up and excitement filled the east village. The innkeeper knocked on their door and told them to get up and meet in the village centre with the other folks. A well-known east side elder, Aputi, began to speak. "Now that everyone is here, please listen up. There is so much news. The island has been invaded by hostile strangers who have begun to attack and kill us." The crowd gasped. "There was a battle 2 days ago in a cave in the Travertine Hills, where a number of our folk were injured or killed. Then there was another battle yesterday, where even more were injured or killed. We have not found a way to stop them as of yet." "I have an axe here! Who will join me to go and fight them?" yelled one from the crowd. "Wait, my brothers. There is even worse news. These invaders have caused the west wall gate stone to plunge into the sea, and now the island is flooding. We will have to evacuate to the North Island." The people responded with gasps and moans. "Who would do something so foolish?" one villager shouted. "This is insane! Who are they that they would do this?" yelled another. "We have no choice. We must leave now. The highest point would be the east wall if we can get there before the inner walls flood, said Elder Aputi. Smaller walls, referred to as the inner walls, were built to block spillovers from storms and large waves. These were sectioned off into quadrants around the island. Once the west quadrant filled up, it would overflow into the adjacent quadrants. When those were full, the interior would be next. No one would be safe if it came to that. I am going to lead a group to the north side, where the boats will take us to the North Island. First, we will travel to the east gate. From there, we will walk along the top of the outer wall to the north side, said Elder Aputi. Laggy, totally exhausted, had fallen asleep in the cart where he travelled with the other wounded. He and H shared a cart together. The roads were rough, and every bump made them even more aware of their injuries. It was almost impossible to sleep. They reached the inner gate on the north wall. Many people were lined up there. People were standing on the road or just beside it. The gate was closed. This was not a good sign. It meant there was already water in the pool, blocking everyone from reaching the outer wall, where the boats were waiting to take them to the North Island. H made his way up to the front, and Laggy followed. Laggy was looking for his mother, searching everyone he saw along the way. H, I don't see my mum anywhere, said Laggy. I know, Laggy. We will find her, H promised. One of the women tending to the wounded approached H. H, you need to have a look at Hawiya. Can't it wait? We have the evacuation to tend to, replied H. No, this is very serious. He is worse, much worse. Please come, she insisted. H and Laggy both hobbled over to the cart where Hawiya was riding, and there, tied up in the ropes, was one of the greenish-grey creatures, like those they had fought in the caves. Its yellow eyes were open, and it struggled against its restraints. What the... It's one of those creatures, said H. Where is Hawiya? This is Hawiya, said the caretaker. He has been tied up here since we started. It is him, but it isn't him. He has changed? Asked H. Yes, he had a bad cough and was very sick, and then he changed, said the caretaker. His illness caused him to change? Asked H. Yes, I can say so with certainty, she answered. Keep everyone away from him. I don't want anyone else getting ill. I will send a guard to help you keep an eye on him. We will deal with him later. First, we must decide what to do next. We have to act quickly, or we will all be killed, said H. Laggy and H limped to the inner wall gate. They could see the water flowing into the inner pool was already half an axe-handle deep, with hot mist rising from it. People were already standing on top of the outer wall. They had crossed before the inner wall had filled up with water. The evacuation of the island had already begun. There had been several trips to the North Island by boat. North Islanders knew what was going on. In response, they had loaned the South Island all their boats for the evacuation. H gathered everyone up and began to speak. Everyone knows what is at stake here. Our time is short. We must get across the inner pool before it tops the lower walls and begins flooding the interior. We are going to build a bridge between the inner and outer walls. We will fashion it out of the trees located nearby. We will build 3-legged supports at the same height as the inner wall and lay logs across the tops of them and lash them together until we reach the outer wall. Every able body will join in the effort. There is one small boat not too far from here. We will send some men to fetch it, and we will start using it in the meantime until we can finish the bridge. Everyone busily started working. Laggy and H sat together among the other wounded. H was barking out orders to people as the work progressed. H, I am not leaving until I have found my mum and my sister. Laggy, we will find your mother. We must get this work done first. It is the only way, said H. If your sister is in that cave, the chances are going to be very slim for her. I'm sorry, Laggy. I fear all caves on the island will be flooded by this disaster. Laggy looked down at the ground. He just couldn't accept this. There has to be a way, he thought. Laggy, what do you think about this matter with Hawea? You saw him. What do you think is going on there? Asked H, trying to distract Laggy from his troubles for a moment. Hawea is sick. These creatures didn't invade the island from across the sea. They are islanders. They are our friends and family. We have to find a way to help him, said Laggy. Laggy, you don't think like anyone else I have met. I agree with you, but the others will want to throw him over the wall into the hot sea, and maybe anyone who tries to stand in their way. Other than keeping them from throwing him into the sea, how can we help him? Laggy crinkled his brow and frowned a little as he shook his head slightly. The work on the bridge was completed. Slowly the healthy people crossed the bridge. The wounded were ferried across on the small boat until all the islanders crossed the flood water and were now waiting on the top of the north wall. Rua personally helped Laggy make the climb up the stone stairs to the top of the outer wall. From the top they could see the expanse of sea water and the boats that awaited them. More islanders were travelling down the south road. Some islanders had made their way along the top of the outer wall. They came from all directions. Everyone hoped the word had spread to all the other islanders. "Women and children first," commanded H, as they loaded the boats headed for the North Island. "Then the wounded will go after them." There was still no sign of Laggy's mother or sister. H rounded up all the able-bodied men and began to speak to them. "We are about the business of evacuation. We must come up with a better strategy on how to deal with the creatures. Unfortunately, we have discovered through Hawea's illness that he has somehow transformed into one of them. I believe that these creatures are not invaders from afar, but are our own friends and family." "How can that be? We fought these creatures in the cave. They are vicious animals. They attack us without provocation," shouted Tufa, an islander who was well known for his large size and physical strength. "That's right," others agreed. "They have contracted an illness. Unfortunately, we don't know how to cure them. We are keeping Hawea isolated from everyone so that they don't catch it from him," answered H. "If he is one of those creatures, I say toss him into the hot sea," shouted Tufa. "Toss him into the hot sea!" Others followed. "We are not going to toss anyone into the hot sea," replied H calmly. "We are here to discuss strategies for protecting ourselves. Pule and Sion have arrived from the West Gate. They were there when the gate stone was lost. I have asked them to speak of their experience." Pule stepped forward. "We did not see the creatures approach. They climbed the stairs behind us. When we tried to talk to them, they charged us. Afu and Sion fought them with their bare hands. Sion killed one with a single blow to the creature's face." "It can't be Sion, the coward of the West Gate, the one who fled when the great wave struck," shouted Tufa. "Yes, I saw it with my own eyes. Sion of the West Gate fought bravely and killed one of the creatures with his bare fists," continued Pule emphatically. "In the battle, he was struck broadside with the flat of an axe head and knocked off the wall onto the stone below. He was knocked unconscious, but amazingly, he survived the fall and is here now," said Pule. "How can that be?" challenged Tufa. "Yeah, how could that be?" rumbled some of the others in the crowd. We fought the creatures in the cave with 100 armed men, and we only killed 4 of them and lost 20 men, stated Tufa. Pule continued. Afu, too, killed 1 with his bare hands, but he was seriously injured and knocked off balance by one of the creatures. He went over the edge of the wall into the hot sea, but not before he grabbed one of the creatures and took it with him. Both were killed, but the only screams of pain I heard were from Afu. The creature did not call out. Sion stepped up. This is all true. I'm lucky to be alive. Sion remembered with shame his act of cowardice when the deadly wave came. Pule had run away in fear, while Sion and Afu stood and fought the creatures. Sion thought to spare Pule the public disgrace he might have endured by leaving out that part of the story. The crowd was still grumbling in disbelief. Pule, how did you survive the attack? Asked Tufa. I ran, answered Pule, while looking down at his feet. You never fought them? Asked Tufa with incredulity. No, answered Sion. Another coward? Shouted Tufa. Some in the crowd moaned in disapproval. H faced the crowd. Their courage or lack of courage is not the issue here. We have no reason to doubt the veracity of their stories. We have learnt that blows to the head have been more effective than other blows landed to the body. If we are forced to fight and defend ourselves, then we will aim for their heads. We also know they are not immune to the hot sea. So, if we fight on the walls, then we can use this knowledge to our advantage. Push the creatures off the wall into the hot sea if you get a chance. But no one lays a hand on Horwia. He is in our care and is harming no one as we have him tied up safely. For now, we will station guards to watch, and others will help with the evacuation. More stragglers continued to wander in. It was getting late in the day when a large group of people were spotted along the top of the east wall. Lagi thought he could see some who looked like his mother, Twila, Ranji, and their brown goat, Palu. That goat! It has to be them! Lagi's heart jumped with joy and excitement at the realization. Mum! He shouted. It's me! Lagi! Then his heart sank. He saw 3 figures running along the wall, coming up fast behind the travelling party with his mother. He did not like the look of them. Rua, Ku, look there, coming up behind them, shouted Lagi. Rua, Ku, Sion, Tufa, Pule, and several other men grabbed weapons and took off towards them at a dead run. Lagi grabbed a stone axe and began hobbling along the wall after them. As they ran, they could clearly see this was a group of islanders, their friends and family to be sure, but there were creatures closing in on them fast. The men among the group of fleeing islanders stopped and faced the creatures. 3 islanders lined up to face the 3 charging creatures. The creatures crashed into them. The islanders fought back, but all their swings missed. 2 of the creatures landed blows with their axes. 1 of the islanders was knocked off the wall and fell into the shallow inner pool, where he lay, unmoving, in the scalding hot water. If the blow or the fall hadn't killed him, then surely the water had finished him off. The other islander was struck in the midriff and fell backwards. Replacement islanders immediately stepped up and joined the fight by filling the gaps the fallen had left behind. Finally, help arrived, but not before 4 of the men lay dead and others were wounded. The weary islanders stepped aside as Ku, Rua, Sion, Pule, and Tufa ran past them to join the battle. When they arrived at the front line, Ku grabbed an injured man and pulled him back. Rua, Sion, and Tufa stepped up to meet the attack head-on. All 3 brought their axes down on the creatures. Rua and Sion missed, but Tufa's mighty blow came straight down from the top and struck the creature squarely on the head, splitting it wide open. The blow dropped the creature instantly to the ground, where it lay motionless. One of the creatures swung at Tufa, striking him high up on the outside of his broad shoulder. He took a couple of steps back and moaned from pain. The other creature swung at Rua but missed. Rua swung back to no avail. Tufa's injured arm dangled uselessly. With the other hand he raised his axe and brought it down onto the creature's head. The creature dropped where it stood. Sion then raised his axe and planted it into the head of the last remaining creature. It too dropped to the ground. Now all the creatures had been vanquished. The crowd watching on the north wall broke out in a huge cheer that went on for several minutes. The creatures had been felled, but at a cost. 4 islanders were dead and 8 were wounded in the fight. But to the islanders, it was a battle finally won after so many defeats. Ranji was wounded but still alive. Tuila tended lovingly and tenderly to his wounds. Sion helped bandage Tufa's huge muscular arm. "You fought bravely, Sion. I am sorry for calling you and Pule cowards," admitted Tufa. "It's okay, you weren't wrong. I'm ashamed of my cowardice at the West Gate, and I want to make up for it," confessed Sion. Pule overheard his comment. He had felt ashamed for his own act of cowardice too. Lagi embraced his mother. They hugged for a long time. She had tears in her eyes. Then, when Lagi told her what had happened after he left her at Ranji's house, they wept for Lei for a long while. Women and children, friends and family were reunited on the North Wall. It was a joyous moment for some, and a sad moment because of those that weren't with them. The women and children were evacuated first, then the wounded, leaving those able-bodied men who could still fight behind. The water began flooding the inner island. They split all the able-bodied men into 3 groups. One group stayed behind at the north wall. Orders were given to depart with the boats if the creatures showed up in enough force to risk their being taken. The islanders knew they couldn't allow the creatures to get to the North Island. There were no more islands to evacuate to. This would be their last stand. The other 2 groups of armed men were sent down the outer walls to look for those that might still be stranded. One group travelled to the east and the other to the west. The men who travelled down the east wall returned with a dozen islanders they found trapped near the east gate. The men who travelled to the west encountered one more creature. There was a fight. Sion and Pule fought the creature together and brought it down. Together they struck the final blow. Sion, however, was wounded during the fight. Another islander was killed. Pule helped bring Sion back to the north wall for evacuation. He was proud that he had stood side by side with Sion and helped vanquish this creature. Pule held his head high, and those around him thanked him for his bravery that day. Lai was lying in the dimly lit cave, unable to move. When water began pouring in, her mind was hazy. She was barely conscious. She thought she had heard her brother calling out to her. The end for her came swiftly. The dim light faded out to be replaced by a new, much brighter light that held her in a loving embrace. Lai could see her entire life playing out before her. She was so sad that she had caused her family so much pain. There was a voice from the light. "Your brother still needs your help. You are being offered a chance to live as a condor. It would be a rare honor. There are many that have waited a long time for this opportunity, as it is a highly sought-after experience, but all of those that have waited are willing to step aside and wait a little longer." Lai responded to the voice. "If there is a chance I can help my brother, then I accept." She awoke to a cracking sound, and she could see a tiny speck of light appearing in front of her.